el link de público en general para evitar confusiones. Gracias.
Una pregunta, yo también, Cícero.
No, no, Cícero. Hola.
No, nuestros invitados especiales no, Cícero.
Tampoco, gracias.
Acaba de entrar el señor Alberto Echeverría para el test. Yo me estoy yendo. Señor Alberto, un gusto tenerlo con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes. Un gusto en saludarlos.
Entonces, yo me retiro ya, Raiza, para que ustedes continúen con los test de los invitados especiales.
Ok, gracias, María.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Echeverria. This is Paolo from the control room from Torino. We can hear you and see you clearly. So right now you can turn off camera and microphone and just turn on camera and microphone a few minutes before your speech is programmed.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rolando, por favor, ¿me puedes hacer co-host?
So, Daniela, I think we test all the speakers.
Yeah,
because the other
we did.
The other are pre-recorded videos. So I think we are on time to start. So in 5 minutes.
Perfect.
No, maybe someone started yet. We are live. I see the people joining.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's 9:25, 26.
Okay, no problem. So I turn off my microphone till the end of the event.
Perfect.
And there is the time Gabriela can start directly. When she turn on the camera, we will start live. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Muy buenos días y bienvenidos todos y todas al lanzamiento para América Latina y el
Good
Caribe.
morning and welcome to the Latin American and the Caribbean launch for the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor 2021. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Gabriela Frias, and it is a pleasure to join you today, in which our united region reaffirms its commitment to end child labor by 2025, as established in Target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, more than ever, in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, we must ensure that no child or adolescent is left behind and act with urgency and determination to protect their rights and ensure opportunities for their families and communities to stay out of poverty and access social protection services throughout the Americas. Act, inspire, and scale up are the three pillars that should lead the way this year. You who follow us on this broadcast can join us right now with this objective by sharing this event on social media with the hashtag #EndChildLabor. End child labor is the hashtag. As our region is diverse, we remind you that you can follow this launch in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese by selecting the language of your choice at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome the ILO Regional Director for Latin American and the Caribbean, Mr. Benicio Spinedo. Good morning. Good morning, Gabriela. Thank you. I would like to welcome you to the launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor in Latin America and the Caribbean. A warm welcome to the more than 2,000 people connected right now. This is a challenging moment to remember our commitment with the children and adolescents in the region. We face a socio-economical crisis without any precedents, and this is the equivalent in the progress. In the last 25 years, the region has achieved important progress, and we must highlight that 9.5 million children and adolescents were working in dangerous activities, and we cannot go back. We still have 7 million children that are still working. What happens is that the quality of income, the increase of poverty, joined together to the closure of schools, have created a crisis with a great impact on childhood. Last year, we met with ECLAC, and we had more than 300,000 children and adolescents that left school because of the impact of this crisis. Considering all the special measures for lockdown, the situation is getting worse. It is important to mention that the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor was created to boost concrete actions to achieve Target 8.7 for the Sustainable Development Goals and put an end to child labor by 2025. The idea of this celebration this year came on the 4th World Conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 2017. After that, out of the General Assembly in New York, we adopted a resolution with several countries that declared 2021 the International Year to put an end to child labor. With this event that sets the beginning of the International Year, we show the sustainable commitment of the highest level and the political will in the region to put an end to child labor. You heard the messages of presidents, vice presidents, ministers, and the leaders of employers and employees organizations. We need to invest and work together to be more efficient based on the social dialogue, working with the public and private partners that are also part to this response. Here we face a big problem that brings responses that are social, cultural, that limits the potential and the ability to protect. We know the problem, we know what works, what doesn't work, and right now it's the time to act with policies and enough budget to scale up what we have achieved. We must progress in the goal of put an end to child labor, and we need to speed up. As the regional director, it is an honor for me to be part of the initiative. And this is a platform that seeks new responses, new answers. From the ILO, we maintain a firm commitment to the elimination of child labor in the region. Our goal is in the core of the strategy of a decent work, reaffirmed in the recent declaration of the centenary for the ILO. Now, more than ever, we must affirm our commitment. Our work is to educate. Our ideas is to bring immediate and efficient responses. COVID-19 does not have to mean a high price to put an end to child labor. Thank you.
Vinicius, bueno, las cifras son dramáticas.
Thank you, Vinicius. And the numbers are dramatic. 2020 means that many children can go back to that situation of child labor. And this launch refers to concrete actions, joint efficient actions that promote the social dialogue. Thank you, Vinicius. And now we will hear presentations of first level. We have simultaneous interpretation to our panelists. Please remember to speak. Try to speak paced so interpreters can follow you and we can convey the message that you want to share with our audience this morning. Now we will hear from India, the 2014 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, a person whose committed and courageous action has inspired many others to join in for a world free of child labor. Thank you.
My dear children of Latin America, Your Excellencies, dear sisters and brothers, my dear friends, buenos dias. Thanks to ILO and the organizers of this very important event. Though I am sitting thousands of miles away from you, but my heart is close to you because I have intensely traveled and worked with many of you over the last almost 2.5 years. So I can say with conviction that each one of you has that courage. Each one of you has that compassion, that energy, that enthusiasm, that power to put an end to child labor, this scourge on the face of humankind and on the face of Latin America. Dear friends, I recall 20 years ago, I have met a 15-year-old mother of a child who was trafficked, sold, enslaved, raped, and delivered a child. When I was trying to console her and convince her that you are not still old, you can still go to school, she said, it's too late. If you can do something, do for my child. 2 or 3 years ago, I had a chance to meet many children in Argentina, in Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Panama, and many other places who are still working in agriculture fields, in small-scale industries, factories, or working on the streets. We all know that we have made tremendous progress over these years, in 20 years. Globally, the number of child laborers have decreased from almost 250 million to 152 million. And that's why we can say that if we really wanted to do, we can do. We have knowledge about the problem. We know the solutions. We have much more technology, much more wealth than ever before. Then what stops us to do? Therefore, this kickoff of International Year is very critical and very important, particularly because the response to pandemic has been so unjust as well as inadequate and unequal. So we risk to lose the entire generation, and a larger number of children may fall into child labor. We cannot afford, we must not afford to turn the clock back. And that's why this event is a turning point where our collective resolve and individuals' resolve, where our conviction and compassion has to increase and deepen. When we go back from here, we have to go with a pledge and resolve that we would not allow it to happen. We cannot allow to turn the clock back. Dear friends, to make this year much more meaningful, much more productive and effective, a group of Nobel laureates, students' unions, teachers' organizations, trade unions, employer organizations, corporations and businesses, faith leaders and media, as well as multilateral organizations came together and have launched a campaign, Fair Share to End Child Labor. And Fair Share to End Child Labor is calling for giving the voices of the most voiceless, giving the faces to the most faceless survivors of slavery and trafficking and child labor in all forums. May it be parliaments, may it be the regional or local or national meetings, the survivors' voices must be heard. Through this Fair Share campaign, we are calling for a fair share for our children in all resources allocations, budgetary allocations, ODA funding. We are calling fair share in social protection programs, in policies and laws. And we hope that right from the ordinary people to decision makers, will listen to the voices of survivors and give them the fair share. So far, we have failed our children. If we look into our policies and programs, no one can say that the children were able to get the proportionate fair share in any walks of life. Dear friends, we have no other choice. If we have to end child labor by 2025, we have to take actions now. We have to work with a sense of urgency. We have to work with a genuine partnership as well as mutual cooperation and coordination. We have to work with a sense of moral responsibility and moral accountability at every level. And finally, I would say, dear friends, that if one single child is in danger, the entire world is in danger. If every single child is not free, I am not free. You are not free. No one are free. And therefore, the global march which we began 20 years ago is not yet ended. We cannot stop. We have to march. I call upon you to march. March from slavery to freedom. March from ignorance to education, exploitation to education. Dear sisters and brothers, my dear young friends, march from darkness to light. Let us march to put an end to child labor. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias por este potente mensaje de Kaila Satyarthi, Premio
Thank you
Nobel.
very much for this powerful message. You already heard. We call you to join this campaign. Remember the hashtag, no child labor, if you want to join. And with the efforts of these campaigns, we can put an end or eradicate child labor by 2025. Now, I would like to invite you to listen to Ms. Sofia Mauricio, former child domestic worker and Peruvian activist for the rights of domestic workers, representative of the Asociación Grupo de Trabajo Redes, founded 32 years ago, and director and host of the program No Somos Invisibles, We Are Not Invisible, for the past 8 years. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to greet especially the political leaders, the guests present, and thank the ILO for giving me a space to make my voice heard in an event of utmost importance for our continent, the launching of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. My name is Sofia. I am the third of 6 children of an illiterate Andean woman, my mother, Maria Basilio, who is now 86 years old and has just won the battle against COVID-19. I am originally from the rural area of Cajabamba province in Cajamarca, one of the 3 poorest regions of Peru, and ironically, one of the most important for large-scale mining in my country, a mining country. When I was 7, I started as a domestic worker in the village near my community. Why? My mother was left alone with 4 children born and another one to be born, and what to do when faced with the children's cry of hunger. Her only way out was to take me to the village and see who will accept me for work. It took a while. But finally, she managed to get someone to take me into her home. Those were very difficult times. I was a 7-year-old girl and suddenly had to face the culture shock of moving from rural to urban areas. From being at home with my siblings and my mother to living and working for strangers who expected me to do things like an adult, and that every time I didn't do things the way I should, which was almost always, came what I feared so much: abuse and violence. And the pain that this caused me hurt more than my own body and made me feel that I was worthless. When my mother would come to see me and ask me how I was feeling, I will tell her I was fine for 2 reasons. One, so she wouldn't go away sad, and the other because I was threatened. That is, if I told what happened, the punishment would be worse. I had no choice. A few years later, tired of the way I was living, I asked my older brother, who had also been a child laborer, to take me to the capital because Lima sounded like the promised land. the place where all the problems that existed in the provinces would be solved. How wrong I was. At the age of 12, I became a child nanny, taking care of a 15-day-old baby. Of course, the psychological and physical abuse and attempted rape continued. So I continued as a child domestic worker and then adult domestic worker for almost 30 years. This supposed paradise of Lima never existed. My story, however, is not only mine. Since my involvement with my organization, AGTR, La Casa de Panchita, in the movements fighting against child domestic labor and defending the right of adult domestic workers, I have seen how my story is repeated not only in thousands, but in millions of girls and boys in the Americas. Child labor is very diverse, but in all cases, it produces the same thing. It leaves us with scars and a generation without the right to enjoy their childhood. Declaring 2021 as the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor is encouraging, but at the same time, a major challenge in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The loss of work and the increase of precarious work for many adults has the effect of increasing child labor, and especially child domestic work, placing children in situations where many will work only for food. I wonder, in the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, what should be our goal? While 1 year is not enough for all that we should do, we do need concrete and urgent action because our children should not have to wait any longer. Therefore, I call on the governments of our region to act on establishing laws and state policies for the prevention and eradication of child labor with budgets that guarantee the protection of the rights of the most vulnerable children, and also ensuring a quality school that reduces the gap that exists in educational services, investing in infrastructure and digital connection, which is no longer a privilege, but a basic necessity in education. To be effective, these measures must be adapted to and take into consideration the cultural diversity of children living in rural areas and those most at risk of dropping out of school. I would also like to call on the international community to continue accompanying the work of the civil society organizations and those of us who see the realities of more than 10 million children in child labor in the Americas. We need your support as well as that of our states to continue advancing with our work. We have the energy and commitment, but we need resources to make a real change. Finally, I would like to call on citizens not to be indifferent to child labor. Let us be part of the change. Let us not rob them their right to live and enjoy their childhood and to have positive memories to share in the future. Our responsibility as adults is to protect them and help them break the vicious cycle of child labor and poverty. for their sake and for the sake of all of us. Now, as a conclusion, I renew my hopes that one day, not so far away, there will be no more children who put their present at risk and that they will have better opportunities for the future. Let's do something now. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you so much, Sofia Mauricio, for letting us understand what it means to talk about 10 million children and what the pandemic brought and how we can eradicate child labor. And she said it, the child domestic worker, the adult girl. Thank you so much for this message. And now let's continue with the presentations. Now let's turn to the message of Mr. Guy Ryder, General Director of ILO. Dear friends, I am pleased to have the opportunity to send this message to the Latin America and the Caribbean region on such an essential issue as the fight against child labor. This year, 2021, we celebrate the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. It is a call to turn commitments into actions, which will finally eliminate child labor. These actions must be more decisive and energetic, more than ever in response to the worst crisis of modern times that undoubtedly has dramatic consequences for the present and future of girls and boys around the world, and especially in the Americas. Now is the time to strengthen alliances between governments, workers, and employers in conjunction with the United Nations, agencies, and organized civil society, and to do so in a way that allows us to achieve the necessary results. Latin America and the Caribbean already have an alliance that has demonstrated this vocation. The Regional Initiative for Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor, which is an example of how it is possible to act jointly for the protection of children and adolescents. We have already made significant progress. The number of child workers was reduced by 100 million between 2000 and 2016. This was a remarkable result and demonstrated how political will, together with a joint action of social actors and a greater awareness of this problem, are effective. And now, it's up to us to do even more. Last year, ILO Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor achieved universal ratification. This is the first time this has happened in the 101 year of history of the ILO, and it's a historic milestone. But ratification of the convention is not enough. We need to unite and take action to fully implement it. We have a long way to go. And in early 2021, that is clearer than ever, the effects of COVID-19 have the potential to reverse much of the progress made, increased poverty, and falling household incomes, school closures, and increased vulnerabilities are all factors that can contribute to increase child labor. And that is why this International Year is not about talking, it's about doing. And we ask everyone to make a commitment so that we have a better chance of achieving our ambitious SDG goal of eliminating child labor by 2025. Friends, I would like to conclude by highlighting the importance of this regional lounge in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank the heads of state, government representatives, and leaders of the employers and workers' organizations, as well as the CLAC and UNICEF, for joining their voices so that this message for the children of Latin America and the Caribbean resonates throughout the region with greater force and is translated into effective action. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this message that it's about doing. And we will have coming messages of our authorities in Latin America. I want to remind you the hashtag that we have that is end of child labor. I would like to share with you the message of Iván Duque.
I would like to send my greetings together with my wife, Maria Juliana Ruiz, First Lady of the Nation, to all the participants in this event to launch the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. Colombia, as a founding member of the Regional Initiative Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor, has acted with determination to eliminate this scourge. It has done so by bringing together the efforts of 30 countries in a joint effort between governments, employers, and workers. Between 2018 and 2019, the child labor rate in Colombia was reduced from 5.9 to 5.4%. 58,597 children and adolescents stopped working during this period. We received the recognition from the US government as one of the 8 countries among 131 that presented significant progress to prevent and eliminate child labor. We are making progress in the fight against child labor with legislation, training of public servants, and modern tools, such as the Integrated Information System for the identification, registration, and characterization of child labor. This system makes it possible to capture, analyze, consolidate, and articulate information on the involvement of children and adolescents in child labor to make it accessible and useful to all entities involved in the restoration of rights and to monitor the actions of governments and mayors' offices in the prevention and eradication of child labor in their territories. The coordination between the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Education, for example, made it possible to cross-check data with the integrated enrollment system. More than 11,000 children and adolescents registered in the system were identified and verified in the reestablishment of the right to education. We'll continue working to strengthen the coordination with entities such as family police stations and to continue implementing the lines of actions and strategic access of the public policy line for the prevention and eradication of child labor and comprehensive protection of adolescent workers. This is vital as we face the challenges of this pandemic that could increase child labor. Our commitment is to prevent and continue reducing this evil in society. Eradicating child labor is not only part of the target 8.7 of the SDGs, it is also a commitment and a priority for us. We are sure that a society that is increasingly aware, informed, and willing for children to live their childhood to the fullest is a society that sows daily well-being for the future. Thank you very much to all of you, and we continue working together for the defense of children and adolescents. Thank you very much. We thank the message of President Iván Duque Márquez and First Lady. Now we will listen the experience and the message from the President of the Republic of Guatemala, Alejandro Yamateh.
Señores jefes de Estado, representantes de la Organización Internacional de Trabajo.
Heads of state, representatives of the International Labor Organization, and participants in this important event to launch the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor within the Regional Initiative for Latin American and the Caribbean. I want to tell you that more than 33% of the Guatemalan population is under 14 years of age. We are a country of young people with a vision to take care of this precious treasure we have. So we have prioritized in our policies and plans the actions that allow us to achieve their comprehensive human development and put an end to child labor. As is well known, the United Nations declared 2021 as the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, which represents an invaluable opportunity for us to renew and reiterate our commitment to the eradication of child labor in all its forms, but especially those that are recognized as the worst forms of child labor because of the danger they pose to the lives of children and adolescents. As a state party and an international scenario in the light of the universal system of human rights and in observance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the American Convention and the Convention of the Rights of the Child, we join this global initiative aware that efforts to combat this scourge must be strengthened, but that we must generate strategies that allow us to advance at the national and regional level in the fight against poverty. We need to expand the coverage of education and social protection. In the face of these existing challenges, we must add the challenges derived from COVID-19 that create a greater vulnerability for this sector of the population. As a sign of the commitment of the state of Guatemala, we have formed at the highest level the institutional coordinator against labor exploitation and child labor called CCLT, strengthening interinstitutional actions that allow us the early detection of cases linked to the worst forms of child labor as a mechanism of cooperation and coordination that integrates the government entities to the justice sector and allow us to give a prompt and effective response to the population. Likewise, we will continue to favor the interinstitutional and multi-sectoral coordination spaces, also strengthening local coordination mechanisms so that actions have a greater reach throughout the national territory and prioritize the needs, especially where child exploitation is most prevalent, which is in the rural areas of our countries. In addition, the child labor risk identification model has been implemented throughout the country, which we have called MIRTI, joining a regional initiative that has allowed us to have accurate data and a nationwide mapping of the level of vulnerability and risk that exists in the country in relation to child labor. In 2020, we started the pilot plan for the implementation of phase 2 of the MIRTI, and we have advanced in the mapping of programs and services aimed at children and adolescents in the municipality of San Pedro, Zacatepeque, San Marcos, which will give way to the construction of a local response through a municipal public policy, a process that has the support of the International Labor Organization, the ILO, and the Economic Commission for Latin American and the Caribbean, ECLAC. As a specific public policy, the government of Guatemala is preparing for the implementation of the strategy for the prevention and eradication of child labor and the protection of adolescent workers, which will allow us to align national actions with the regional and global objectives, such as Target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Likewise, in compliance with Conventions 138 and 182 on child labor of the International Labor Organization, without forgetting the importance of linking national policies. The initial programming of this prevention strategy covers the period from 2021 to 2025 and will serve as a reference framework for the development of programs and projects that will have political support at the highest level. The sum of efforts between the different sectors of the country will undoubtedly allow us to move forward with a firm step in a participatory manner and from social dialogue towards the achievement of our most ambitious goal, which is the eradication of child labor in Guatemala in all its forms. We are sure that with this sum of efforts, we will be able to achieve the objectives set for the country, the region, and at a global level through Alliance 8.7. Now more than ever, we'll fight for a Guatemala where our children can be children, be educated, play, grow, and be healthy with a proper shelter and be able to dream of a better future. We'll work together to eliminate once and for all child labor in all its expressions. I wish you the best of success. The struggle to eradicate child labor is a struggle of the world, in this case, of a region. May God bless you. You just heard the message from the President of Guatemala, President Giammattei. Now I will give the floor to the messages of authorities of our continent. Now we will hear the President from the Republic of Peru, Francisco Sagasti. Please go ahead. Heads of State of Colombia, Mr. Iván Duque, and Guatemala, Mr. Alejandro Giammattei, Mr. Marvin Rodriguez Cordero, Vice President of Costa Rica, Director General of the International Labor Organization, Mr. Guy Ryder, representatives of the organizations of the United Nations System, UNICEF, and ECLAC, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be here with you. On this occasion, I would like to thank the International Labor Organization and the Latin America and the Caribbean Regional Initiative for the Elimination of Child Labor. The ILO, represented by Mr. Guy Ryder, of which our country, Peru, is a founding member and promoter. The regional initiative is a tripartite platform for cooperation in which, following the tradition of the ILO, through social dialogue, exchange of experiences, and knowledge transfer, we work together to achieve target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which seeks, and I quote, to end child labor in all its forms by 2025. Since 2019, Peru has declared itself a pioneer country of Alliance 8.7 and is accelerating efforts to achieve this goal. Child labor is a problem and a tragedy that affects the entire world, especially Latin America and the Caribbean. The endemic social and economic inequality in our region accompanies and accentuates this harsh reality that threatens child development. Peru has a sustained trajectory in the fight against child labor that began with the ratification of the Fundamental Conventions on Child Labor of the International Labor Organization, Convention number 138, on the minimum age for admission to employment, and continued with the adhesion to Convention number 182 on the worst forms of child labor. These commitments are being implemented in Peru through the National Strategy for Prevention and Eradication of Child Labor. Also, Peru has a National Steering Committee for the Prevention and Eradication of Child Labor. And for the last 18 years, it has been a space for multi-sectoral coordination and the participation of business associations, trade union organizations, and the civil society. With all these actors, we launched at the national level on January 29th of this year, the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. With this initiative, we assume the challenge of strengthening the territorial management of public policy on child labor through the dissemination of the child labor risk identification model, and also the implementation of the municipal model for the detection and eradication of child labor. With these policy instruments, we will prioritize actions in the territory, throughout the national territory, in order to identify, care for, and protect children and adolescents from this scourge of child labor. We have called on parents, families, and society as a whole to work with the government to guarantee or ensure the protection and the full enjoyment of the rights of our children and adolescents. Remembering the words of our beloved activist and politician, Nelson Mandela, and I quote, "Our children are our greatest treasure. They are our future. Those who mistreat them tear the fabric of our society and weaken our nation." I end quote. Coincidentally, the year 2021, the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, is also the bicentennial year of our independence in Peru. Despite the adverse circumstances that we all face, and we in particular because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I would like to express my words of confidence and hope that in the future, we can consolidate the libertarian dream and ensure that our children and adolescents have equal access to the full and safe development of their full potential. Finally, I would not like to end these words without thanking you for your commitment and calling on all of us to join together to act firmly and achieve the goal of putting an end to child labor. Thank you very much. You just heard the message of the President of the Republic of Peru, Mr. Francisco. Now we hear important messages from authorities. Hashtag is end to child labor if you want to join this campaign. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Costa Rica. We have the Vice President of Costa Rica, Mr. Marvin Rodriguez. Good morning. The floor is yours.
Muy buenos días. Excelentísimo.
Good morning, Mr. Ivan Duque, President of Colombia. Mr. Alejandro Yamatei, President of Guatemala. Mr. Francisco Sagasti, President of Peru. Mr. Benicio Pinedo, the Regional Director of the ILO for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Carzamuda, Minister of Labor and Social Security in Jamaica. Mr. Kailan Tatiati, Nobel Peace Prize winner. Ms. Alicia Barcenas, Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Mr. Yukuk Abdel Jidil, Regional Director in UNICEF for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Alberto Echeverria, representative of the International Organization of Employers. Mr. Pereira da Silva, Secretary of Social Policies of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas. Ms. Sofia Mauricio, former child domestic worker and Peruvian activist for the rights of workers, home workers, and representative of the association Grupo de Trabajo Redes. Ms. Gabriela Frias, journalist in CNN Español, and participants of this important event. On behalf of the government of Costa Rica, it is a pleasure to greet you and share with you all of an event as important as the regional launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor in the Americas. It is so timely this celebration and the declaration of 2021 as the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, since in such difficult times as the ones we are going through, where the consequences of COVID-19 are not limited to the health sphere, but also translates into the economic and social spheres. It is necessary to reflect on the importance of strengthening and protecting our children and adolescents. It is precisely at this time when we must emphasize the urgent need to strengthen the existing actions and seek new strategies to prevent that this population group joins labor activities for which they are not yet prepared. This is the importance of a region that is united for the same goal, which is achieved through the regional initiative Latin America and the Caribbean, free of child labor, a platform that has become an innovative instrument to accelerate the eradication of child labor and achieve target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, foreseen for 2025, to eliminate child labor in all its forms. As a founding member of this initiative, Costa Rica is working tirelessly to accelerate the achievement of target 8.7 of the SDGs. An increase in the employment rate of minors is something we must not allow, not only for those who are under the age of working, but also for those who, even though they have the required age, they engage in dangerous activities and abandon their studies, thus jeopardizing their present and future. It is not possible to deprive them of the right to study that limit or to limit the full exercise of their human rights by joining the labor market with the intention of supporting their families. This situation further aggravates a reality in such complicated times, since a country that does not protect its children is a country that compromises its future. Therefore, we must remain united, fight against this scourge, and not lose focus on the fulfillment of Goal 8.7 to end child labor by 2025. On behalf of Costa Rica, I would like to congratulate the International Labor Organization, all the member countries of the Latin America and the Caribbean Regional Initiative, and its technical secretariat for their great efforts to address this problem. In addition, I would like to recognize the important contribution of all the cooperating organizations that with their support, we can make this a reality. I believe that as a region, we have set the example of unity for the world. So let us demonstrate that it is possible to become the first zone in the world free of child labor. Thank you, everyone.
Perdón, estaba yo con el micrófono
Excuse me, my mic was off. I would like to thank Vice President of Costa Rica for his message, Mr. Marvin Rodriguez. This is an ambitious goal, the one that he's setting in the context of the launch of this initiative, the first zone of the world free of child labor. Now let us continue with the next presentations. Now we will hear the words from the Minister of Labor in Jamaica, Mr. Carl Samuda.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first let me express thanks to the International Labour Organization and the regional initiative for their dedicated and unwavering support to combat child labor in Latin America and the Caribbean. Without your assistance and guidance, the gains made by Jamaica would not have been possible. I also wish to commend you for this regional launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor, which will give greater visibility to the region and highlight the progress made. Whilst being faced with the challenges posed by the global pandemic COVID-19, we must all nonetheless make every effort towards achieving target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is important to note that this virus has the potential of significantly increasing the likelihood of children being exploited. The impact is grave because it ranges from children's inability to access online classes due to the lack of infrastructural development in rural areas, thus making them susceptible to all forms of exploitation. Today, the government of Jamaica remains resolute in its commitment to ensure that the children of this country are protected now more than ever. I hereby confirm that we will continue to work with national, regional, and international partners to accelerate measures to achieve target 8.7 of the Sustainable Development Goal, which speaks to the elimination of child labor in all its forms by 2025. As part of the preventive approach, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security will be launching an extensive public education campaign, which includes work being undertaken at the community level to ensure that our citizens and, more importantly, our children are informed and protected now more than ever. As the Minister of Labor and Social Security, I urge civil society groups, non-governmental organizations, the private sector, and every Jamaican to partner with the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to join in the campaign as Jamaica says no to child labor. With your partnership and education, we will achieve our vision, which is Jamaica, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias al señor
Thank you very much to Mr. Carl Samuda, Minister of Labor and Social Security. Before we continue with our next presentations, I would like to invite you to watch this video. It's
nos comprometimos a nivel global a poner fin al trabajo infantil en todas sus formas para el 2025.
Esto nos impulsó a soñar y en 2016, en América Latina y el Caribe, imaginamos un año especial dedicado a este objetivo.
En 2017, dejamos el sueño atrás para convertirlo en una promesa.
Y en 2019, el mundo entero se sumó para hacerlo realidad.
Así, nació el Año Internacional para la Eliminación del Trabajo Infantil 2021. Una oportunidad histórica para actuar, inspirar y escalar nuestros compromisos concretas y eficaces que aseguren los derechos de la niñez y la adolescencia.
En el contexto de la crisis por la COVID-19, que pone en riesgo los avances logrados en protección de la infancia y reducción del trabajo infantil en América Latina y el Caribe, necesitamos actuar para
Asegurar el presupuesto público adecuado.
Mejorar la aplicación de las leyes.
Llegar con servicios de educación, salud y empleo a poblaciones vulnerables.
Incrementar la productividad de las empresas con pleno respeto de los derechos laborales y con responsabilidad social.
Construir cadenas de valor libres de trabajo infantil.
Y aumentar la conciencia y el compromiso social.
Todos y todas sumamos desde nuestros diferentes roles para que los millones de niños, niñas y adolescentes que trabajan y quienes están en riesgo de hacerlo no se queden atrás.
Podemos y debemos ofrecerles un presente seguro y un futuro brillante con oportunidades. Este 2021, aceleremos el paso hacia la meta 8.7 y demostremos que en América Latina y el Caribe podemos poner fin al trabajo infantil.
Súmate tú también al Año Internacional 2021 y actuemos ahora.
Bueno, pues nos quedamos entonces
Well,
con
we will stay here with that phrase. Join in, take action, join in and end child labor. And that's something that we have to do. And as Mr. Guy Ryder mentioned, this is time to do. Let's continue with our guest. And I am pleased to give the floor to Mr. Alberto Echavarria. Good morning, welcome. He's the representative of the International Organization of Employers. Good morning, Gabriela. It's such a pleasure for us to participate in this event and to be able to share the celebration of the ILO on the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. From the vision of the employers, we have been following up on these processes. In 1996, when the ILO, with the initiative at the Netherlands, was able to foster this initiative that were part of the Convention 182, the employers were always able to participate and be part of this initiative because there are some structural events that we have to mobilize, and each time with more emphasis as what we are doing right now with the Alliance 8.7. Factors as the poverty, informal work, that are elements that are present in our region. They are very substantial points for the employers, and businessmen participate actively. In the same manner, the way that we have to provide education, health, recreation, and the most important, caring, love, affection, that in their personal relationships, they can enjoy the world and prepare on that journey to becoming adults. And we estimate that the loss of a year of education can represent 25% of the income reduction to those children that get involved with the labor work. And that's why we foster initiative. In one hand, we are creating a campaign with leaders who are involved in the Alliance 8.7 with the Pathfinder countries to identify specific partners. And at the same time, we are elaborating a set of activities with best practices that could be exchanged with other organizations. We do have an action plan that we have been running during this year to share these topics. We are going to involve and collaborate as members of the international community in this type of initiative that have been coordinated by the United Nations, and also to provide innovative approaches. For this reason, we are ready to create an award that is called Change Challenge International. with the companies that will keep the best innovations and in the way that we can approach these actions. Finally, as a Colombian, I would like to emphasize to the members of my organization that probably it was the first organization that was able to state a declaration on child labor and to avoid any form of children, not only in the company, but but within all the supply chain. Together with the other organizations in the region, we have worked with around 30 organizations in different countries. In Colombia, we have been working and as a fundamental part of our own culture. Any company that can get into our association will have the commitment to eradicate child labor. At the same time, we keep the commitment to develop social actions. In conclusion, Gabriela, and probably this is the first time I do this, with the platform of the ILO, with the passing of a great friend in the ILO, I would like to mention my colleague Roberto that passed away due to COVID-19. He was not only a personal friend, but at a Latin American level, he was the president of the Alternative of Trade Unions. And with him, we were able to coordinate a lot of projects to eradicate child labor in the region and in the country. That's why I would like to honor his name and to acknowledge his memory. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you, Mr. Alberto Echavarria, representative of the International Organization of Employers, and we express our condolences. We know the importance of this person and his relevance on this struggle. And it's very important to share the voice of the employers, this message to understand that you have mentioned the topic of the culture, innovation, to think out of the box and how to add this solution to the framework of this event. Thank you, Mr. Alberto Echeverria. Now I want to give the floor to Mr. Cicero da Silva, Secretary of Social Policies of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. Greetings to Mr. Guy Ryder, to the Regional Director, to the ILO Director General. I will speak in Portuguese.
Que emocionou a todos nós com seu depoimento, e aos chefes de Estado presentes.
And I would like to
queria dar uma saudação em nome do secretariado da Confederação Sindical.
On behalf of the Secretary of the Trade Union Confederation of Workers, which represent 55 million workers in the region, to all those present, as well as to all the organizations, institutions, and personalities participating here. It is in this important activity, like almost all the interventions that preceded me, we cannot fail to mention the brutal impact with HIV/AIDS pandemic in many areas of our societies. In particular, it has further aggravated the situation of child labor, which, according to UNESCO, we can see an increase in child labor for the first time in 20 years. In other words, we find ourselves in a much more complex situation than in previous years. The impact for the health point, with thousands of lives around the world, the crisis of health and sanitation system, and the loss of millions of jobs affecting many families, the low or no social protection coverage, the closure of schools, lack of access to internet, social security, and high levels of poverty that are conditions that have worsened in the current context that favor the increase of child labor. We have monitored some measures and to be able to share the impact. This impact has created a crisis to many families, and they don't have any access to social protection and have favored the way to help them. 10.5 million children and adolescents were working in Latin America and the Caribbean. 75% of them were engaged in hazardous activities. 68% are unpaid family workers. 48% work in agriculture. 90% are informal. In the most unequal region in the planet before the pandemic, we already stated that if the challenges in Latin America regarding informality and poverty are not solved, we will have to face them. As long as there's no equitable distribution of health, children and adolescents will always be the main victims, not only of child labor and forced labor, but they will not have access in the future to basic rights such as health, social protection, education to ensure their social and productive development in life and in the decent work. Today, at the regional launching of the International Year of the Elimination of Child Labor, this should be really an act accordingly for what we need to go beyond intentions, good declarations, and letter of commitments, acting in coherence with this orientation must be now and in the different countries at the risk of having a potentially more traumatic and explosive situation. Cícero?
Vigilante, proposital de sindicatos na luta contra o trabalho infantil. É fundamental, mas é fundamental essa responsabilidade. Mas a principal responsabilidade corresponde aos estados, que devem enfrentar o problema.
This will only be possible but guarantee labor rights, union rights, including unionization and collective bargaining, expanding and strengthening social protection, making labor inspection effective, guaranteeing the right to health and public, free, intercultural, and quality education at all levels, effective, democratic, and inclusive. Social dialogue continues to be an essential condition for the eradication of child labor in all its forms. Cícero, we will need you to select the Portuguese channel. We apologize to our audience. I know that we're struggling to understand properly the message. Gabriela, I'm asking you, should I continue? The organizers are telling me it's not necessary to repeat. Please, you are providing us a lot of information with figures, but the interpreters are trying to follow your speech. Thank you very much.
Como disse, desde a fundação da CSA em 2008, está comprometida com a prevenção e eliminação do trabalho infantil em todas suas formas e com combate à causa gerado e produzido. E desde 2017, com a participação da Iniciativa Regional da América Latina e Caribe de Trabalho Infantil, que consideramos importante reforçar efetivamente a promoção do verdadeiro diálogo social com a participação das partes interessadas nas organizações de trabalhadores e governos empregadores.
The organizations of workers. For this reason, we have approved the roadmap with each one of the organizations, institutions, and actors from their roles and responsibilities, strengthening and intensifying the tripartite action to it effectively to accelerate the achievement of Target 8.7. Eradicating child labor will be more visible to extend that we guarantee decent work for adults and greater guarantee of rights to education and health for the entire population. We have to be on top of the government initiative. And the good times where the children were working, we have to be on top of other countries that show the possibility to eradicate child labor. And also, it was possible to get into a country during the pandemic. Child labor is a plague that removed the hopes of children and adolescents, as what we see in the statement of Sophia. Let's be on top of the eradication of child labor. No to child labor. Thank you very much.
Detener un poquito para que tuvieran nitidez en este audio.
Thank you, Cicero. We tried it to stop so you have access to this audio and important presentation where he shared very important figures. Cicero Pereira from the Trade Union Federation of the Americas. Now, I would like to share with you that the joint action for the United Nations agencies to advance in the prevention and elimination of child labor in Latin America and the Caribbean has yielded very positive results in terms of effective public policies, improved knowledge and capacity building in different countries of the region, which have contributed to a sustained reduction in the number of working children and adolescents. In this context, we will now listen to the message of Ms. Alicia Barcenas, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. Dear friends, it is an honor for me to address you on the occasion for the regional launch of the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. First of all, I would like to greet Mr. Benicio Spinedo, Regional Director of the International Labor Organization for Latin America and the Caribbean, and his team, and to recognize the extraordinary collaboration we have had on the issue of child labor. The teams of both ECLAC and the ILO have come a long way together. This international year will provide a unique opportunity to focus attention on the millions of children and adolescents whose rights are being violated today because they are in a situation of child labor. Certainly, these are difficult times for our region and for the world. The coronavirus pandemic has not only caused the largest contraction of gross domestic product and world trade since the Great Depression of the 1930s, but has exacerbated structural problems of our development model, certainly highlighting our high levels of informality, poverty, and inequality. Although the incidence of infection and mortality from COVID-19 in the child population in general are lower than in other age groups, children are being greatly affected by the socioeconomic impacts of this pandemic, and above all, by the confinement. Previously, children and adolescents were already a population with marked vulnerability, with a higher incidence of poverty. As we have said many times, poverty has a child's face compared to other age groups, and they were already greatly affected by multiple inequalities in various dimensions. The impact of this pandemic, as we have shown in a report we prepared jointly with UNICEF last December, we can highlight that the monetary poverty could affect 51.3% of the child population. Likewise, the prolonged closure of schools has a profound impact on the lives of the youngest and most vulnerable children in terms of learning, educational progression, food safety, and it is in the school environment where many children and adolescents receive essential food support. Above all, the lack of attendance to classes, together with the loss of household income, have created conditions that increase the possibility of premature incorporation of children and adolescents into the labor market under very precarious conditions. Last June, ECLAC and the ILO warned that given the current socioeconomic conditions and despite all the efforts of the countries, there could be a significant increase in the rate of child labor in our region. This implies that at least between 109,000 and 326,000 children and adolescents could enter the labor market, adding to the 10.5 million who are already in child labor. This is a clear setback to the efforts we had taken to eliminate this practice. Dear friends, ECLAC, as part of the United Nations Interagency Group on Child Labor, IWG, has made it clear that child labor is the product and the origin of chains of inequality, which are expressed when exercised throughout the life cycle of individuals and are projected intergenerationally. This perspective complicates the notion that the eradication of child labor is a natural result of poverty reduction in countries. For this reason, recognizing the complexity of this phenomenon, taking into account the different forms in which it occurs, is already a fundamental step in developing relevant and effective strategies for its prevention and eradication. We must prioritize the resources for children. For example, we have proposed universalizing access to social protection and health and granting a basic emergency income to children and adolescents in our region, following the mandates of the Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 3. And above all, guaranteeing education for all, without discrimination, with quality standards, with adaptation to new technologies, as stated in SDG 4. Equality, sustainability, and international cooperation are essential and key to move towards a transformative recovery that guarantees the rights of children and adolescents. This is a social, moral, and political imperative. Now more than ever, children and adolescents must be at the center of priorities for action because it is our future. By taking urgent action to put an end to child labor in all its forms in line with Target 8.7 of the 2030 Agenda. May this International Year be one more step to revitalize alliances between governments, employers, workers, the civil society, and international cooperation to intensify efforts so that in the very near future, Latin America and the Caribbean will be the first region in the world to put an end to child labor. As a region, we say, this is the year to act. Now, more than ever, no to child labor. Thank you, Alicia Barcenas, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, for this message. We must take measures to address this problem, the important increase of the rate. The number of children and adolescents could enter the labor market, adding themselves to the more than 10 million working already. Now, I would like to give it to Mr. Yusuf Abdel, the UNICEF Deputy Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Yusuf, please select the language Spanish at the bottom bar so we have clear channels of communications. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate today in the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor in the Americas. It is an honor for me to be part of this great panel.
La Convención sobre los Derechos del Niño En su artículo 32 se establece la obligación de los estados.
Article 32 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child establishes the obligation of states to protect children and adolescents from work that is harmful to their health, education, or development, to set minimum ages for admission to employment, and to regulate the conditions of employment. This instrument has been ratified by all the countries present here, and all have stipulated minimum ages for entry into the labor market. Just like Guy Ryder said it, ratifying is not enough. We must act. It is also important to remember the indivisibility of the rights and the relationship between them: health, education, participation, protection against violence. For example, hazardous child labor in the case of children and adolescents often has serious consequences for their health. At UNICEF, we work day by day, hand in hand with all of you, to make this a reality. We also support, as established in the Sustainable Development Goals, immediate and effective measures to ensure the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor, including the recruitment and use of child soldiers, and by 2025, put an end to child labor in all its forms. This is going to occur through the specialized child protection systems of their countries, identifying children and adolescents who are trapped in some of the worst forms of child labor, analyzing their cases, restoring their rights, even the rights to education and health. From UNICEF, we are committed to work with all of you, the governments, the civil society, the private sector, to put an end to child labor in the Americas and globally. Using as a reference previous studies in other pandemics where UNICEF was at the front line with national partners, we can say that in this case, children and adolescents affected were in the need to take on new roles and responsibilities to complement the family income, whether or not they lost their caregivers due to this disease. In addition, there was a correlation between the school closures and the increase in child labor and exploitation. UNICEF is committed to providing continuity in the learning of children and adolescents, as well as highlighting the impact on the present and future development of those living in the most vulnerable households, of the prolonged closure of schools and educational centers, causing greater school dropout and backwardness, in addition to the economic and public health shock represented by COVID-19. There is also a greater risk of food unsafety, mistreatment, physical and emotional health problems, and last but not least, loss of learning with consequences that can widen existing gaps and that could be devastating for an entire generation. In conclusion, I would like to stress the importance of all of us working hand in hand, governments, private sector, trade unions, and the United Nations, to ensure that in 2021, the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor in the Americas, to act and prevent the COVID-19 crisis from increasing the number of children and adolescents who are working. It is also paramount to ensure that the Americas region continues to make progress on the 2030 agenda, and that by 2025, we put an end to child labor in the region, or at least take important steps to achieve that goal. Thank you all for your kind attention and commitment. You heard the Deputy Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Mr. Yusuf Abdel Jalil. Thank you for your intervention. Everyone, each one of us from our own homes have the opportunity to act. You already heard that. Child labor. And because of this, I would like to invite you to hear together voices from the art, cooperation, sports, and other scopes that are committed in action to put an end to child labor in Latin America and the Caribbean.
El trabajo infantil determina que los niños no vayan a la escuela. Y es en la escuela donde pueden encontrar su futuro. Con el trabajo infantil les estamos cortando las alas. Que nuestros niños crezcan con juegos, con ilusiones. Ahora más que nunca, no al trabajo infantil.
Quiero unirme en la felicitación y el apoyo a la OIT en este Año Internacional de Erradicación del Trabajo Infantil. Construir una América Latina libre de trabajo infantil es un objetivo que ha venido apoyando y viene apoyando la agencia en los últimos 25 años y muy particularmente desde 2014 a través de la iniciativa América Latina y el Caribe libre de trabajo infantil. ¿Qué significa libre de trabajo infantil? Significa que no tengan que abandonar las aulas los niños, niñas y adolescentes para contribuir con su trabajo a la renta familiar. Significa que puedan tener una educación, una nutrición adecuada, que puedan jugar, que puedan hacerse amigos y construirse un futuro. Si siempre ha sido un objetivo importante y en el que además la OIT ha cosechado muy importantes progresos en la región, lo es si cabe todavía más como consecuencia del devastador impacto de la pandemia, que amenaza con suponer un cambio de tendencia en términos del abandono escolar. Por tanto, me uno a mi felicitación por esta iniciativa a la OIT y en votos para que las discusiones lleven a un importante progreso y a retomar la vía de erradicación del trabajo infantil en la región. Muchas gracias.
Hola, soy Benicio y quiero contarles que América Latina y el Caribe en las últimas décadas han demostrado que sí se puede poner fin al trabajo infantil. Este 2021 es súper importante que todas y todos seamos las voces de esos millones de niños y niñas y adolescentes que aún son víctimas de este gran problema. Yo ya me sumé al Año Internacional para la Eliminación del Trabajo Infantil. Actuar, inspirar y escalar. ¿Y vos?
Me sumo al lanzamiento del año para la eliminación del trabajo infantil en las Américas. Ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
Es un honor poder participar en el lanzamiento para las Américas del Año Internacional para la Eliminación del Trabajo Infantil. Saludo atentamente a todos los jefes de Estado y de Gobierno que hoy nos acompañan, así como a los representantes de las agencias de Naciones Unidas y de la cooperación internacional que se suman a este lanzamiento. La Junta de Andalucía ha venido colaborando con la Organización Internacional del Trabajo desde el año 2014 hasta nuestros días por alcanzar un objetivo que hoy nos vuelve a unir por la eliminación del trabajo infantil. Somos conscientes de la grave situación que sufren los niños, niñas y adolescentes ante la coyuntura actual de la pandemia COVID-19 y más aún de la enorme situación de vulnerabilidad en la que se encuentran todos nuestros niños, niñas y adolescentes, muchos de ellos y ellas, además en América Latina y en todo el mundo. Por eso, este año 2021, la Consejería de Igualdad, Políticas Sociales y Conciliación de la Junta de Andalucía, a través de su Agencia de Cooperación Internacional para Desarrollo, se suma a este lanzamiento con el firme compromiso de continuar el trabajo sostenido que hemos venido dando a la iniciativa regional para América Latina, en alianza estratégica con la Organización Internacional del Trabajo, para que el 2021 podamos todas y todos decir, ahora, más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
Hola, acá les habla Loco Abreu, y entre todos tenemos que empezar a ser la voz de los niños y niñas que están siendo maltratados y usados en trabajos infantiles. Son más de 10 millones que están padeciendo esta situación en América y en el Caribe. Por eso que te pido que ahora, entre todos juntos, y ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
En América Latina y el Caribe aún existen 10 millones y medio de niños y niñas sometidos al trabajo infantil. En este 2021, desde el rol o lugar que ocupemos, comprometámonos a erradicar esta situación de extrema vulnerabilidad. Ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
To all of our partners in the regional initiative,
Latin America, and the Caribbean free of child labor, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this inaugural event today. The United States remains committed to addressing child labor and to improving the lives of children around the world. Since 1995, the U.S. Department of Labor has supported efforts to address child labor in more than 100 countries. In Latin America and the Caribbean region, we currently fund 27 projects in 15 countries to prevent and reduce child labor. While we have seen progress in the past 2 decades, we also know that many of these gains could be lost due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this context, the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor presents a crucial opportunity for all of us to redouble our efforts and to create a world free of child labor. Today, the United States renews our commitment to eliminating child labor, not only for 2021, but for the years to come. Now, more than ever, without child labor.
Hola, soy Javier Almonacid, líder de la campaña 100 millones Chile. Para este 2021, mi compromiso es colaborar en la campaña en contra de la lucha del trabajo infantil y su erradicación, enmarcada en la meta 8.7 de la Agenda 2030. Debemos exigir una distribución justa del poder y además debemos volver a movilizarnos para erradicar toda forma de trabajo infantil.
La niñez no solo es el futuro, es también el presente. Hagamos que toda la sociedad conozca la realidad de niños, niñas y adolescentes que trabajan. Ahora más que nunca, no al trabajo infantil.
Hola, soy Fernando Arap, subsecretario del Trabajo, y este año 2021 tenemos que decir todos juntos no al trabajo infantil. Chile fue invitado el año 2018 por el director general de OIT a ser país pionero en esta materia, lo cual, además de un tremendo reconocimiento, es un gran desafío. Que este año 2021, no solo Chile, sino que el mundo diga no al trabajo infantil.
Hola, mi nombre es María Alejandra Chinchay y soy la lideresa de la campaña de 100 millones en Perú. Para este año tan importante, el compromiso de nuestro equipo es apoyar en la visibilización de la problemática del trabajo infantil, generar incidencia política y canales de discusión para buscar la mejor manera de erradicar el trabajo infantil en nuestro país.
Los niños que trabajan casi no asisten a la escuela y se ven afectados gravemente en su concentración. En este año, en este 2021, el gran desafío es reforzar los controles y sobre todo dar a las familias más oportunidades para evitar que los niños trabajen. Ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
Buenos días, buenas tardes. Hablo en nombre de la Organización Internacional de Empleadores como secretario general. Este es un año difícil, es un año de pandemia, es un año de crisis, es un año que ha puesto en prueba y está poniendo en prueba nuestra economía y nuestros compromisos sociales. Tenemos vigente un gran compromiso para la erradicación del trabajo infantil y tenemos que estar a la altura de las expectativas. Corremos el riesgo de que muchos niños terminen de nuevo en una situación inaceptable. Una situación inaceptable que también afecta a la región. Más de 300.000 niños corren el riesgo de volver a una situación de trabajo infantil que no podemos permitir. Como Organización Internacional de Empleadores queremos lanzar una iniciativa y vamos a lanzar una iniciativa precisamente en este ámbito. Y lo que queremos es comprometer a nuestras organizaciones, que son organizaciones independientes, pero que también son organizaciones representativas y muy influyentes para que este año no suponga una vuelta atrás. Queremos felicitar también a la OIT, a la Organización Internacional del Trabajo, por los esfuerzos que ha estado realizando en este sentido. La iniciativa regional, los puntos focales son de enorme ayuda para nosotros. Muchas gracias por comprometerse con nosotros. Cuenten con nuestro compromiso. Nuestra credibilidad está en juego y nosotros estamos vinculados fuertemente a nuestros valores. Muchas gracias por escuchar.
Hola, mi nombre es Lina Natalia Alvarado y soy líder juvenil de la campaña 100 millones para Colombia. Este año debemos alzar la voz por los más de 10,5 millones de niñas, niños y adolescentes que se encuentran en situación de trabajo infantil que no los hace ser libres. Este año debemos lograr una mayor participación de jóvenes en el control político para garantizar la construcción de políticas públicas en torno a los derechos de la niñez en Colombia y en Latinoamérica. Por supuesto, también hacer un control en garantizar la estabilidad económica del núcleo familiar de estos niños, niñas y adolescentes. Este año los jóvenes estamos más comprometidos con la meta 8.7 de las ODS para inspirar y actuar.
Levantemos nuestra voz para que se tome conciencia de la realidad que padecen millones de niños y podamos eliminarlo definitivamente. Ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
Soy Evelyn Ortiz, deportista. ¿Sabías que aún existen más de 10,5 millones de niños, niñas y adolescentes en América Latina y el Caribe que se dedican a trabajar? Perdiendo toda posibilidad de desarrollo, un mejor presente y futuro. Es por esto que desde nuestros roles te invito a concientizar respecto a este tema. Ahora más que nunca, sin trabajo infantil.
Ahí tienen ustedes las distintas voces a la que voy a
There you
sumar.
have it, the different voices. And now I am going to join the regional director from ILO, Benicio Spinedo. The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you for leading this. I would like to start by repeating what Nobel Prize said. There's no way to there's no greater way to violence the dreams of children, and this is a very explicit Sofia Mauricio's testimony, asking us to not be indifferent. Indifference is a way of complicity, and we cannot just turn our face to what's happening. Here we heard commitments at the highest level, all the presidents, leaders, head of states. They are paying attention because we have more than 3,000 people here. Everything's recorded, and their statements are recorded. When President Sagasti said that children are the greatest treasure of a country, and like Vice President Marvin Rodriguez, a country that does not protect its children, it's jeopardizing its future. This is a moral and ethical issue, and there is a socioeconomic aspect as well. Child labor means the total loss of human, the destruction of the capital, and the sacrifice of the economic state. That is clear. And like my boss said, the commitment is good, but this is the moment to act, to do, not so much to speak. And with this event, we set the launch, the beginning of a process that should be followed by concrete actions. So for example, like the General Secretary of the Employers Organization, interesting initiatives on innovation, and Mr. Echevarria with the Changing Makers Initiative and similar things. Other actors spoke about very concrete initiatives to speed up the achievement of this goal. I would also like to say, and here I would like to reference Cicero and Alicia, child labor also depends that adults and parents have decent work. If we have decent work for people, the lower child labor is we're going to have. So this is an interesting reality.
Bueno, creo que tuvimos un problema con.
I believe we had an issue with Benicio Spinedo. Please let me know if he's over with his comments, or should we wait for him to come back? You already heard the authorities, you heard the representatives from employers and workers, different voices from different scopes. And let us not get confused. We are speaking on a tragedy that affects the world and a tragedy that is going to exacerbate if we do not do more. I would like to close with what the ILO is doing. He's coming back in a few seconds, but I would like to say that we have 3 pillars this year to do more, to speed up. We are living a pandemic. We are going through a challenge. Vaccinations in Latin America are not getting at the speed we needed. Hence, the time we have to recover lost employment, to not say low quality employment with children at risk. That challenge is not going anywhere. The 3 pillars set by the ILO are to act, inspire, and scale up. And today, we need to live not only with the hashtag no to child labor, but also to think what we can do to act, to inspire. How can we scale up all the efforts from authorities to make this even more than an event, a joint effort to fight this tragedy that affects the entire world and that the pandemic is threatening to exacerbate. I'm being told that Benicio is not going to reconnect. I would like to thank you for your participation and go back to your daily lives. Benicio is here. Benicio, please go ahead.
No, Gabriela, perdona, ya tenía concluido.
I'm sorry, Gabriela. I was almost finishing. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Vinicius. I was told that you're back. Okay, he's back and we are closing this event. Please take care. And at the same time, let's try to multiply the efforts because the efforts need to be multiplied. This is a complex challenge. We need to act, inspire, and scale up. Have a great day. Thanks for your presence. See you soon.